We are the largest airline in the world. We continue to grow strongly thanks to the low fare, low cost model, which continues to succeed in markets all over Europe. In fact, it continues to succeed beyond even our most unreasonable expectations. This year we grow to 119 million passengers. We carry that traffic across 85 different bases. The formula that originally made Ryanair successful, which was low fares, has now been transformed over the last 2 or 3 years with the addition of the Always Getting Better customer experience program. And it's a result of that combination, unique in the airline industry, of lower prices and industry-leading customer service. Our forward bookings are rising strongly, our traffic is growing very strongly, and we would hope that by the end of the year we'll see that translated into profit growth as well. To cope with this growth over the next number of years, we've ordered another 305 aircraft, which is almost double the size of our existing fleet. And one of the challenges for us here in Ireland, but particularly post-Brexit, is where are we going to allocate that growth? Where will those aircraft go? And in other words, where are we going to be delivering the kind of traffic growth we'd like to? Just to touch it briefly, we have lower fares than anybody else. Last year our average fare was €46. We expect that will fall this year by between 10 to 15% as our average fare falls below €40. And that's the reason why our traffic growth is so strong, up from 106 million passengers last year to 119 million passengers this year. The good news though is that our costs are still falling. While many other of our competitors, including EasyJet this morning, admit that costs are rising, Ryanair's per passenger costs, excluding fuel, are still falling. That is the addition of new lower cost aircraft, where we have buying them directly from Boeing. We hedge the dollar at over 130 to the euro, and that will continue to lower our aircraft costs for the coming years. We have pay deals in place with all of our people, but in return for which we're getting productivity enhancements. And more critically, we're still delivering significant growth at many airports all over Europe. And those airports are incentivizing us to grow. So we have our airport costs falling, our ownership and maintenance costs falling, and thanks to the success of Always Getting Better, our sales and marketing costs are falling as well. With that, we're expanding the presence across Europe. We've done a big push this year, the back end of last year, this year, into the German market, where we were particularly small. We've been somewhat fortuitous in that we're growing strongly in Germany at a time when Air Berlin, the other big incumbent, is collapsing and looks like being broken up now, with the short-haul schedule being absorbed by Lufthansa, and the long-haul or the charter piece being put together with Etihad, TUI and something else. But in essence, they're going to continue to significantly reduce their capacity at a time where we're growing. So we had originally about a 4% market share in Germany. We expect this year that will have doubled to at least 8%, if not 10%. And our market share in many of these markets are rising very strongly. We're now number 1 or number 2 in almost all European markets, with the exception only of Germany, where we're number 3, but I suspect we may overtake Air Berlin and become number 2 within the next year or two. We remain a distant number 3 in France, and we have very little ambition to grow in France because it's not an economy that encourages enterprise work or anything else, although we do fly to 29 French airports. So what are we doing in Ireland? In Ireland here, for summer 17, we have 4 bases, 7 airports. We've over 130 routes for next winter, and I'm pleased to say we're announcing 2 new routes for winter from Dublin, Tours twice weekly and Valencia twice weekly. This is significantly less growth than we would have had in previous years, but that's because unfortunately Dublin Airport is not extending the growth discounts under which we delivered 70% of Dublin's growth over the last 2 or 3 years. And if they're not going to lower their costs, our growth will be allocated to those airports across Europe, particularly in Spain, Italy and Germany, where costs are being reduced. We reward the airports that are lowering costs. We do not grow at airports where costs are increasing, such as Dublin. And you'll be relieved to know we're not going to have a big rant on about Dublin. That's just a fact of life. They're raising costs, fine capacity, and the growth will go elsewhere. I do think it's important though to make the point, for winter 17, we'll have 2 new winter routes. We'll have a total of 68 routes this winter. Our traffic in the next 12 months at Dublin will be about 12 million passengers. That would be a decline of about 3%. Last year, in 2016, we did 12.45 million passengers. So we'll be down about 400,000 passengers. It's not the end of the world, but I think it's disappointing in a year where we will grow by about another 10 or 12 million passengers. Our home market, Ireland, will see a decline of about 400,000 passengers. We're talking to the Dublin Airport Authority, and we'd like to see a return to growth incentive schemes. In fact, we'd like to see a return to lower costs overall at Dublin, particularly in a post-Brexit environment. Just to touch briefly on some of the existing issues, the main driver of growth in the last 2 or 3 years was still the decision of Michael Noonan in 2014 to scrap the travel tax. We responded, as we promised we would, with dramatic growth over the last 2.5 years. We account on our own. Ryanair has delivered 70% of the growth at Dublin Airport in the last 2.5 years. So if you want to know where tourism in Ireland has boomed, it is a direct result of the government's decision to scrap the travel tax and Ryanair's response with significant capacity and traffic growth. We've been doing that at a time where we're taking new aircraft, we're transforming the customer experience, and that's meant that we've raised our traffic guidance or our traffic growth expectations for the next 8 years up from 180 million to 200 million passengers. So we're going to grow from about 120 million passengers this year to 200 million passengers over the next 8 years. That's growth of about 10 million passengers each year, or in other words, about the size of Aer Lingus. We'll grow by about the size of Aer Lingus each year. And the challenge is how much of that growth will go to Ireland. Sadly, at the moment, very little, because the DAA are refusing to extend their growth schemes. That means that as the growth scheme ends at the end of every 12 months, the fees into the next year will rise. The DAA will correctly say we haven't raised our fees, no, but by withdrawing the growth incentive schemes or not extending them, the payments that we have to make rise and rise significantly. And as a result of that, we can't grow in Dublin because we have other airports elsewhere in Europe. I think that's a key trend. Across Europe, other airports are now significantly reducing their charges because they want to attract Ryanair's growth. They've seen how Dublin and Stansted have benefited. Stansted continues to lower its fees, as do other European airports. Here in Ireland, we have the runway 2. Most of the airlines are agreed on only one thing: it's too long. They're building a runway that's about 500 metres, half a kilometre too long. In theory, that's so that they can welcome some non-existent A380s from China sometime in the year 2055. On the unlikely event that one diverts from Heathrow, which is where it will probably be going to. And yet we will be asked to pay for that kind of infrastructure. It continues the trend with Dublin Airport in particularly of madcap capex that is used, well, the one up here in the front, of excess spending on capacity, which we, the airlines, don't need for our growth and we shouldn't be expected to pay for. Again, they've also raised the cost of the runway has gone up from 240 million to 320 million even before they went to tender. It is about the only example I can think of where anybody about to make a big building or about to make a big capital infrastructure project would increase the cost of it before they went to tender. Why didn't they go to tender at 240 million and see where the tenders came in? No, the DAA in typical fashion went, no, we think the costs have gone to 320 million, now we'll go to tender, which is not the way it should be done. Brexit is going to be a huge challenge for Ireland and for this economy. It's going to be a huge challenge because it means it's going to be weaker sterling. We think there's going to be significantly less UK visitors coming to Ireland as a result. And there's a real danger in a hard Brexit that's going to be a hard border between Ireland and the UK. While we're preparing for that, Ryanair Labs continues to grow very strongly. It's transformed the customer experience in Ryanair, both the mobile app and the website. Kenny will deal with it in more detail subsequently, but it also means that our ancillary revenues will grow very strongly over the next couple of years. And one issue we are struggling with, and I need to air, is our 2 free carry-on bag policy. We're struggling at the boarding gate because far too many passengers are turning up with half of the contents of their homes now, and instead of one normal size bag and one small bag, we're getting passengers showing up with 2 large wheelie bags. And if it doesn't stop, we're going to have to change that policy because we can't delay our flights while we're trying to take these bags off the aircraft. So our growth over the next number of years was 180 million passengers by 2024. Now it's grown to 200 million passengers by 2024. We would like to place a significant proportion of that growth here in Dublin, but not while the DAA is raising the payments we have to make on an annualised basis. And you contrast that with what's happening at other airports across Europe. Amsterdam has cut charges this year by 7%. It's the 3rd year in a row that Schiphol has cut charges. In Greece, regional airport fees have been cut by 50%. In Germany, ATC charge has been cut by 18% this year. In Italy, they've scrapped the 33% increase in in the municipal tax, and we have responded by allocating about 3 million of our traffic growth to Italy this year. In Spain, AENA, which is an airport monopoly, much like the DAA, has agreed to freeze airport charges for the next 5 years. So lower charges, and these airports all get it. Lower charges equals lower fares equals more customers means more airport revenue. Whereas at Dublin, they're still following the North Korean model of higher fees, we don't care, we're full, and we're going to waste 360 million building a runway that should be built for about 200 million. Brexit is going to be the big challenge for us as an airline and also for the Irish economy the next number of years. The final outcome remains hugely uncertain. It's quite clear the British government haven't a bull's notion where they're going or how they're going to get there. In the meantime, we're going to have weaker sterling, certainly lower fares, and we've seen that already in the fares and yields we've been charging for the last 6 months. There will be slower UK growth, but also slower European growth while we have this uncertainty hanging over us. And the challenge for us as an airline is, will the UK stay in open skies, in which case there's no change, people will be free to move around. But we worry that the price of remaining in open skies will be the UK accepting the free movement of people, because it does kind of naturally follow, if UK wants to stay in open skies, they should accept the free movement of people. I think that may be unlikely, in which case I think we may well be headed for a very hard Brexit. In fact, a Brexit where I don't believe there will be any interim arrangements. I don't think it's possible to get interim arrangements through 27 European parliaments within a 2-year period. And so the British will fall off a cliff in 2 years' time, which could be a catastrophe both for the UK economy but also for neighbouring economies, particularly the Irish economy. As an airline, we will be switching and are switching capacity away from the UK, although the UK will remain a huge part of Ryanair's overall business. This year it will account for about 35% of our 120 million passengers. We do operate 3 UK domestic routes. The likely outturn is that the UK and the European Union may have an air transport bilateral in which EU airlines like Ryanair are free to fly to the UK, and the reciprocal would be UK airlines are free to fly to the EU. But that would mean we couldn't operate the 3 UK domestic routes we currently operate, in which case we may have to come up with a UK AOC just to operate those. It would be difficult, it will add more regulatory complexity, and it will mean challenges. But the biggest challenge will be posed to the UK economy, where there's a real danger that people are going to see a decline in seat capacity to and from the UK, higher airfares for people to and from the UK, and I'm fairly sure that the UK population did not vote for higher airfares when they were voting for Brexit, but then they were largely misled by the Brexiteers. This, however, does pose a major threat to Irish tourism, and therefore we're calling on the Irish government to come up with a new strategy, and we believe the new strategy should be pivot away from our over-dependence on the UK. UK accounts currently for about 43% of our visitors in 2015, and focus its efforts instead on Europe. Europe, which is the second largest originator of visitors at 35%. In 2015, about 2.8 million visitors came from Europe. We think that number could double over the next 2 years if there's a sensible and a government strategy to go after more European visitors. They're close by, they can get here very cheaply on Europe's largest airline. But we need to develop a coherent tourism strategy, one that involves making airport access significantly cheaper here in this country, particularly on European routes. We also need to fix the accommodation shortage. As you know, the hotels in Dublin are now essentially full. Airbnb may help, but all it is a release valve. We need to keep prices down. That means more hotel accommodation being developed as quickly as we can, but we've got to keep prices down at our airports where they're rising, in our accommodation, and also restaurants and entertainment. We would like to see continued development of things like the Wild Atlantic Way, the Eastern, whatever that thing on the Eastern coast is, the Ancient East, God help us, the Midlands and the Great Outdoors. We must get better at repeat tourism. Ryanair is very good at repeat tourism, but our tourism product here, which has developed largely to cater for UK visitors, needs to be much more welcoming towards European visitors in future. We will not plug, if there's a big decline in UK visitors, we will not plug that gap with Chinese or North Americans. It can only be plugged with Europeans, and I'd like to see us on the front foot developing our European tourism, and we certainly have the capacity and the ability to bring many more millions of European visitors to Ireland, not just at Dublin but also through Cork, Shannon and Knock, but there's no incentive in place currently to do that. Given that we're the largest airline in most of these European countries, we would like to be incentivising these people to come to Ireland, but at the moment Ireland is penalising us and those visitors, and we need to change that strategy.